Hey everybody, welcome to episode 20 of the Rollout Show.
What is up?
Yeah, you caught a little bit of mine and Bradley's argument there.
I'm gonna cut that out, so I don't know why you brought that up, but thank you.
Either way, I mean, you whispered it anyway, it barely picked it up, so.
Yeah,
you know.
This is a horrible start to a show.
Should we just redo it?
No, we're good.
Okay,
Just push through.
Just push forward?
Push through the awkwardness.
Push through the
It's fine.
awkwardness.
It's fine.
Speaking of awkwardness, what about this Kyrie-LeBron situation we got going on here?
This was a really shocking development. Apparently, it was shocking to LeBron too. Very surprised to hear that Kyrie, for some reason, doesn't want to play with him. I guess the reasoning that I've been seeing around is that he's tired of playing second fiddle. He wants to be the primary option. And I mean, he's a ball dominant scorer. I could see why he would want that. He's he's in the top 3 of scoring, pure scorer in the league. So I see why he wants the ball more, but I also think he gets the ball plenty currently with the Cavs. I don't know.
You know what this kind of has written all over it to me? This seems so reminiscent of the whole Dwight Howard situation where it's like he seems to get people like in his ear like, you're a star in this league. You know, you need to be the number one option. You need to go to a different market. You need to get out of somebody's shadow. That wasn't as much with like Dwight Howard, the whole being in somebody's shadow, but it was get to a big market. Like, you know, you're the top guy. You need to be the face of this league and everything like that.
But I don't think it's the getting to a better market thing because he said what his top 4 teams to go to were, and they were the Knicks, big market. Yeah. The Heat, big market. The Spurs, I mean, I guess that's a big market, but not huge. But it's probably a big basketball town because they have so much success.
Right.
And the T-Wolves.
But, I mean, just in basically all of those places, though, he's going to be the face of the team.
Yes, I agree with that. So I don't know if the market has as much to do with it as he wants to be the guy. And maybe when it comes to, like, the Knicks, that if that's not about the market, I don't know what it's about because it's a horrible organization with not much talent.
No cap room either. I mean, it's going to be him, Hardaway, and Joakim Noah, most likely. And, well, Porzingis, but, you know.
I mean, I guess at this point, the Cavs could just sell out 100% for next season and trade Kyrie for Melo and I don't know who else. It wouldn't be good.
That'd be quite. Well, I mean, the Knicks don't even have that many draft picks because they've been trading him because they keep going for it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
so it's like,
not much you can do there. Let's talk about a couple of things. There's a couple ways to spin this. One is how this would impact the league. 2 is possible destinations for Kyrie, and I don't remember what the third one was going to be because it just slipped out of my mind. So.
Anyway.
Possible destinations for Kyrie, where we think he's going to go.
Honestly, it looks like a lot of the teams would have to be in the West. I mean, a sneaky team that I could see, not a destination he had on his list, but a team with not only the cap space, but a talented roster and a lot of depth that they could trade from, as well as a boatload of extra picks that they could actually afford to deal.
Mm-hmm.
Denver Nuggets.
The problem is the problem with trading in the NBA is that the money has to match. It's the part that makes trading more difficult than in other sports. If you're the Denver Nuggets, how are you gonna give up the money? Because what's Kyrie making? Like 20?
20, yeah, but
20-ish.
What would really help out, because I think Will Barton is making about 6, and he's probably about to leave in a couple years in free agency anyway. And then you have Kenneth Faried. So that'd match like Kyrie's salary right there. And then you have a couple of younger guys that are like first round picks. They make a decent amount of money, but not a ton. Like I think Emmanuel Mudiay, who doesn't seem to really be in their future plans, but you could ship him off because it's a high upside guy. And then the thing about Denver is they have all these like extra picks these next few years, which is a blockade for a lot of teams because you can only trade a certain amount of picks, years in a row, which is what Cleveland's going to want for Kyrie as well as players. So Denver would actually have enough to make it happen.
Yeah, if Cleveland is going to do this, they have to go into full rebuild mode because unfortunately for Cleveland, this isn't a sport like football where if you traded your star wide receiver and got like good players at a few other positions, it would be worth it. In basketball, the superstar is the most important thing. Even if, when we had talked about this before, you had talked about maybe a Magic trade where they traded a first round pick, Fournier, and Aaron Gordon and Vucevic, and on paper that looks like a good trade. You're trading you're trading a superstar for 3 good players, but in the NBA it just doesn't work like that. Like Kyrie Irving is worth more than those 3 guys.
Exactly. That's what makes this trade so hard, because you have to match up the salaries, and then I'm pretty sure Dan Gilbert still wants to stay competitive, and then he also wants the picks. But that's the whole thing, which is so hard making these trades now, is because you can only deal like a certain number of picks. You can deal like 2 first-rounders, and a lot of teams have already traded their picks. So it would take a team like Denver or what the Celtics had, where you'd have like a lot of extra picks that you could deal from to make it work.
The other problem is so many of the contending teams, or teams that would seem like a good fit, have point guards. The league is full of great point guards right now. It's tough to find a good spot for him that has the pieces for him and doesn't already have a point guard.
And then you also have to factor in like the tradable assets to make the salaries match, or a team that could actually take on the salary. Like the Utah Jazz, I mean, they could take on the salary, but do they have the pieces to actually make a trade to match that? And they really don't, unless they really blow it up and just have Kyrie. They'd have to ship out like Gobert or somebody.
And that's the other part, is if you're one of these teams and you're going to try and get Kyrie, and because he laid out specifically what teams he wants to play for, is it worth it to trade for a guy that won't want to play for you?
Well, the thing is his contract is a pretty long contract, at least like 2-3 years, I believe.
Yeah, so, I think he has 2 years left.
So whether he really wants to play there or not, if he wants to set up going somewhere else and getting another big contract, he's going to have to play.
Yeah, but it's the same situation as Melo. Is if you're unhappy with your situation, your play is going to suffer. Doesn't matter how much talent you have, how much of a superstar you want to be. If you're in a spot that you're not having fun and you don't want to be, even if it's not conscious, even if it's like a subconscious thing, your play is gonna suffer.
That's true. That's kind of
you're gonna play with less energy, really.
That's kind of the similar thing what we have to see with Paul George in Oklahoma City, because right now he's happy to be there, play with Westbrook, got a shot to win and everything. But it's another one of those things, like he didn't necessarily map up like, I'm really looking at the Thunder over there going to Oklahoma City, and that's where I'm gonna go, kind of thing.
Especially in that situation where you have a guy that is your point guard but is bad at distributing the ball, and the other guy has historically complained when he doesn't get the ball enough. So that'll be an interesting pairing.
It seems like, they're decent enough friends, and they both seem really committed to making it work, so we'll see what happens. But that's, again, another one of those things we just have to wait and see if the pairing's going to work.
Another dynamic about this whole Kyrie thing is, I remember a few years ago when LeBron went back to Cleveland, everyone talked about how much they were comparing Kobe and LeBron, in that everyone wants to play with LeBron and everyone hates playing with Kobe, because Kobe's a ball hog and LeBron's a facilitator. And I think you can clearly see that LeBron's a facilitator when Kyrie's getting 25 shots a game. I mean, he's getting his. He's just tired of being in LeBron's shadow, which I guess is fair, but I also think LeBron has made Kyrie the player he is today.
I absolutely agree with that, because Kyrie probably would have been a great player. Potentially if LeBron hadn't been there, but he's gotten him in the spotlight. Like, I think Kyrie doesn't really realize that a lot of the fame and success he's gotten from playing in Cleveland isn't really because of him. It's because of LeBron and then Kevin Love coming over and them competing every season for a championship.
Because they've been in the national spotlight for the last 3 years. And without LeBron, there's an argument to be made that him and Andrew Wiggins still haven't found a way to make the playoffs yet. Because that would be the team if LeBron had never come. It would be Kyrie and Andrew Wiggins.
Right, and then potentially Gordon Hayward had he ended up signing there.
Why would Gordon Hayward have signed with the Cavs?
He agreed to a contract with the Cavs.
Did he really?
Yeah, but then Griffin called it off and put it on hold when LeBron kind of reached out to him and said, "I'd like to come home."
That's right.
Because that's the thing. He was He was a restricted free agent, so Utah probably would have matched anyway. But had Utah not matched, it would be Gordon Hayward, Andrew Wiggins, and Kyrie, which would be kind of
Utah would have matched.
Utah would match.
But yeah, that team actually they probably would have made the playoffs.
It's just an interesting thing to think about, you know?
Yeah. No, it's crazy how these moves shape the history of the league like this. Because the other thing is, the best two players left in the East are on the Cavs. If Kyrie leaves and goes to the West, there's, other than John Wall and maybe Isaiah Thomas, there are no more great guards in the East. They're all gone. It's crazy how much talent is in the West compared to the East.
I mean, you'd have to think the guards would be, you'd have Dragic and
Kyle Lowry
and
DeRozan, Kemba. But I mean, these are the guards. On the other side, we have MVPs. We have Russell Westbrook and Steph.
Could you imagine if Mike Conley and the Memphis Grizzlies played in the Eastern Conference? I mean
they would have at least made it to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Well, I mean, just think about how many All-Star teams Mike Conley would make if that's the setup in the Eastern Conference.
Right now, as it stands, Mike Conley is probably the fourth best guard. If I had fourth, maybe fifth if Kyle Lowry is having a great year, but I would take him fourth if I'm drafting East guards and Mike Conley.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have John Wall, Isaiah Thomas, Kyrie. Well, I guess I should do it in order. Kyrie, John Wall, Isaiah Thomas, Mike Conley.
Absolutely.
And he'd be a perennial all-star in the East. But the West is so stacked that it doesn't matter.
And has been his whole career, and his style of play is kind of more of the old school point guard, and he doesn't show a ton of like flair and emotion.
Well, you say he plays like an old school point guard, but he's got a nice jump shot.
That's the thing. Like he focuses a lot on getting a ton of assists, but he can take over a game scoring too. It's just people don't watch him as much.
Yeah.
He's a great point guard, but it's just people, when he signed the contract, everybody was like, Mike Conley, who? Never made an All-Star team. But it's like a lot of teams would have given Mike Conley that contract, like for real.
Yeah, he may have been a bit overpaid, but he would have got that money. He was worth it. So I guess now we should say there are two possible scenarios here. Either Kyrie's there or he's gone. So let's say Kyrie doesn't get traded. How do you think the Cavs are gonna be next year? You think all of a sudden the Celtics have a shot?
See, I don't.
It's tough. Because
it's LeBron James.
It's LeBron James. I would almost say even if Kyrie left for draft picks only, that the Cavs would still be the favorite in the East because it's LeBron James.
It's LeBron James.
His greatness.
And I mean, it just depends on who else potentially comes over in the trade or anything, but you still have LeBron James and Kevin Love.
And I was about to say that. The interesting thing is we have both been Kevin Love apologists these last few years. We saw what he did in Minnesota and still think he can at least bring some of that back.
Absolutely.
It would be really interesting to see how Kevin Love would be as the second guy instead of the third when he's finally getting his 15 to 20 shots a game instead of 7 or 8 shots a game.
And then just focus on rebounding and passing it out to Kyrie, basically. You know, because
I mean he's been a rebounder. They've crippled him so much offensively because the ball can only be shot so many times.
He's sacrificed a lot to be in Cleveland, and he's also taken a ton of the blame because they'll look at the stat line and be like, Kevin Love, you took 10 shots. Like, what are you doing? We traded Andrew Wiggins for you and everything and all this stuff. But it's like, Kevin Love, you have to have that guy to make those pairings work. Like, he's the Chris Bosh for the Heat, the big three, because Chris Bosh would sacrifice a lot, and then Chris Bosh would always get the blame, it would seem like, in Miami.
Also, to be fair, Kevin Love is being rewarded handsomely financially for his services.
Financially, that is very true.
He's being paid like he's a second best player on the team when he's basically been a rebounding guy in a corner 3 shot.
And
so it would be really interesting to see if Kevin Love can bring back that offensive prowess.
And I think that just goes to show you, just look at all the trade interest that comes up for Kevin Love every season. There's always somebody trying to trade for Kevin Love. So I think that's a pretty telltale sign that people still think Kevin Love is a very, very good player.
Yeah, I think the Pacers made a big mistake. Apparently, they had a trade lined up with the Cavs, Kevin Love for Paul George, and they just didn't pull the trigger on it.
Hmm.
Uh,
I think they did make a pretty big mistake there.
but they also had a trade lined up with the Celtics for like Jay Crowder and Avery Bradley and a pick or something, and turned that down too. I don't know. They're weird over there at the Pacers. I don't think they know what they're doing.
It's a really tough situation, and honestly, I think some of that kind of falls on Larry Bird, because Larry Bird was like just out of the blue, well, yep, I'm out of here. I don't want to see this thing through.
I think he saw the writing on the wall of
he-
Paul George was going to leave, and then you have nothing.
He definitely did, but then he kind of just threw it to second in command, and then it's like, all right, well, you're president now. You were about to go interview for all these other jobs around the league, so all right, well, it's not looking good, so make it work.
Good luck.
Yeah, that's really what happened. And then he was still trying to get his footing, like, hey, I'm taking over all of basketball operations now. And then he probably had to line up, like, oh, who's going to work for me and all this stuff. And then you have the deal like, oh, you're a superstar, doesn't want to be here anymore, and just told everyone. So find value, go.
But the thing is, though, he had value there and he didn't take it. Instead, he went for Oladipo. Like he watched the Magic play 2 years ago and he was enthralled by this young talent.
See, that's another thing. It's like everybody seems to be enthralled by Victor Oladipo that's actually in a front office of an organization, and I don't see it.
He has flashes of greatness, and then most of the rest of the time he's horrible.
And then the sad thing is he's the best player to come out of that draft that I can think of.
Who else was in that draft? That was the
Anthony Bennett,
right?
Yeah, I think there were people like the draft and stash prospects. Like I think maybe like Nurkic, who just got traded to Portland this past season. I think he was like a second rounder in that draft. Maybe like C.J. McCollum. I don't know if that was his draft or something, but
what a horrible draft.
That was pretty rough, man. Like because all the people who seem to have made it out of that draft, none of them were really at the top, and they all kind of developed a lot once they got in the league. But I think this, going back to the Kyrie point and all the turmoil that's happening with the Cavaliers, I think it just goes to show you how valuable David Griffin actually was.
Well, and I agree with you to a point. But the other thing is, at this point, basically everyone knows this is LeBron's last year. And when you have that in the back of your head, it's going to make you do weird things. Like, if you're Kevin Love, for example, all of a sudden, a season from now, this may be your team. And that may make you act in different ways because the rock of LeBron James won't be there anymore. I think that sort of... And it didn't really get out because LeBron is very good at controlling his message and his brand. But there's a really prominent assumption with basically everyone in the sports media and in the sports world right now that this is LeBron's last year. I don't think anyone has any sources for it, but it just makes sense.
I think that's just everybody looking at the different signs because they're like, oh, LeBron off season's in Los Angeles or something. So, oh, he's thinking about the Clippers and the Lakers. But then, you hear the different sources of people saying like LeBron would never play for the Clippers. Don't know what the reason is there, but he would never play for the Clippers. But I don't think that's really an option anyway. But I think LeBron is the one person in his group and circle that actually wants to stay in Cleveland, even if his family, because the reports are that his family didn't want to go back to Cleveland.
Well, I don't know, because the idea is LeBron's mission is complete.
Yeah,
he's won a championship, and he still hates Dan Gilbert.
And see,
he has yet to say Dan Gilbert's name since coming back to Cleveland.
And you see all the weird things that have happened with Dan Gilbert running the show. That's where I think David Griffin comes in, because LeBron James would take shots just publicly all throughout the season. Like, why isn't David Griffin re-signed yet? Dan Gilbert, what are you doing? Like, why is David Griffin not re-signed? Griffin was his guy.
Yeah, and I think he did a pretty decent job with the Cavs. He did everything LeBron wanted, which is what you're supposed to do when you have LeBron James.
And he did everything LeBron wanted and even more. Like, I mean, that's the thing, like the reports of, the first year, where it was like, hey, just keeping you updated. I've got a trade worked out for Amon Shumpert. And then LeBron's like, great, yeah, I love it. And then, oh, also I got them to throw in JR. And he's like, throw in JR? Like, really? Of course I'll take JR. Like, what the heck?
Those were great additions. The Shumpert JR deal was a great move by Griffin.
'Cause I don't even remember what he traded for.
Basically nothing.
Yeah.
It was Phil Jackson's.
Shout out to Phil Jackson.
I think it was his first big move with the Knicks was just getting rid of JR and Shumpert because they weren't good for culture or something like that.
Just people he didn't personally like, which seemed to be
yeah.
at the end, everyone on that roster, besides Joakim Noah, who's apparently his dude.
It'll be interesting talking about Phil Jackson 5 years from now and how we remember him. Do we remember him as one of the 2 or 3 best NBA coaches to ever live, or do we remember him as this incompetent executive?
It really kind of depends on what happens in the next 5 years with Phil Jackson, whether he ends up teaming up with Magic Johnson in LA and everything. And also, Phil Jackson is pretty old.
Extremely old. Late 70s old.
Like, yeah, because like he's really getting up there. So that also, hate to be kind of thinking that way, but that also plays a factor on like.
Well, he wanted to coach, but he didn't think he was healthy enough to do it.
Exactly.
He wanted to coach the Knicks, but he couldn't. And I think that's probably part of the reason why he was such a bad executive, was he was, instead of being just a hands-off executive, he was trying to be like a coach by proxy.
Yeah.
And that really does not work.
And he wasn't, for a long part of his first part of his tenure, he wasn't even living in New York. He was telecommuting from LA.
Yep.
And then he ended up, all the stuff happening. So then he ended up moving to New York. So he was actually
time
there.
To get serious.
Yeah, time to get serious in year 3 when everything's unraveling.
And when you're making $7 million a year as an executive, more than any other executive has ever made.
And see, that's the thing. And then there were the reports of him actually being on the court, like, trying to teach the triangle. That was kind of interesting to, just different players who've been in the league for like 10 years, like Courtney Lee. Here's how you do it. And then just...
Let me verbalize what just happened there for the audience.
Yeah.
Weston made a clicking sound as he was doing hand motions. Like that would somehow convey itself into a good audio format.
Sometimes you talk with your hands, right?
You shouldn't, though. We're doing a podcast.
Sometimes you just talk because you need the feel for yourself because you visualized it. And then, all right, audience, picture this. A 70-plus-year-old Phil Jackson hobbling out onto the hardwood, teaching Courtney Lee, longtime NBA veteran, multiple playoff appearances. Great guy. Widely respected. Going out there and saying, here you go, son. This is how you play basketball. What's your name again? Oh, yeah. This is how you play basketball. Pass the ball like this.
That was way better. Nicely
Thank
done.
you. Thank you.
Nicely done.
See, when I try sometimes, I'm actually pretty good.
Oh, my gosh. All right. Anything else you want to add to this Kyrie thing? Or do you want to move to the other 2 notable things that have happened in free agency in the NBA so far?
We can move on. We'll probably end up circling back at some point anyway, so let's do it.
In conclusion, whether Kyrie is there or not, the Cavs will probably win the Eastern Conference and then lose in the finals again.
See, honestly, I'll just give my little conclusion. I think they're going to keep it together for this one last season. LeBron's going to see the writing on the wall and leave, whether he necessarily wants to or not. He'll leave. They'll trade Kyrie. They'll probably work out a trade for Kevin Love. And if they're smart, they just blow the whole thing up. That's what you have to do. You can't be in the middle. You have to be either really good or really bad.
Or the Houston Rockets.
Or the Houston Rockets will somehow find a way every time.
It's crazy. Daryl Morey may be the best GM in basketball. He's great.
And then the whole fact that, I don't know if you've heard about it, but they're up for sale.
Yeah.
The Houston Rockets are up for sale.
You know who needs to be the first ever player owner?
James Harden?
LeBron James.
Oh, I see what you're going with.
LeBron James.
Are you saying James Harden plus the Banana Boat crew running an organization?
Owned by LeBron James. That'd be great.
I am the all-star small forward. I am owner, general manager, president of basketball operations,
and the GOAT.
And Ty Lue is my head coach, who I convinced to come from Cleveland.
Oh, gosh.
Because Ty Lue can yell at me and I'll still respect him, but Ty Lue knows where his checks are signed.
Anyway, someone finally signed an extension today. I don't know if you saw it or not.
Oh, did John Wall sign?
John Wall finally signed his Supermax extension. It was pretty dicey there. I had heard rumors that maybe he was going to go to the Lakers and play with, I don't know, whoever's at the Lakers at the time.
See, like, I feel like everybody in the media is just throwing out, his dream was to always play for the Lakers because he talked about how much he loved watching Kobe growing up.
Well, it's a team. The idea is that he would, obviously this isn't true now, but was that he would want to play with Boogie because Boogie's his guy.
Oh yeah, because Kentucky guys,
and
absolutely.
They both like LA. That's a spot that would have the cap space to afford both of them.
And then Calipari is going to leave Kentucky and go coach them, and it's going to be the band back together. Like, yeah.
Could you imagine Calipari in the NBA with his guys?
Oh, just everybody because I mean, John Wall,
the Kentucky guys.
John Wall and Boogie were his first guys at Kentucky too.
And then get Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Davis. You got a squad all of a sudden.
All those reports of Calipari's leaving and he's gonna get everybody that was from Kentucky to go play.
That would be incredible.
So much isolation, so much ISO. Oh
yeah,
my
but
gosh.
He would have the best talent.
And then Kyrie Irving somehow just
no, he's not a Kentucky guy. What's wrong?
I know
with
that was the joke, man. Kyrie would somehow find a way. Yeah, it's a bad joke. Come on.
Anyway,
my bad.
So good for Washington fans. Good for the Wizards fans, because if I was a Wizards fan, I would have been very nervous that he hadn't signed yet. Yeah, I'm happy for John Wall. He's a top 5 point guard in this league, and he deserved it. So there you go.
Honestly, yeah, and I'm happy for him. And honestly, I was surprised to hear his comments saying, I want to see what the plan is for, the Wizards in the future, because honestly, for like the past 4 or 5 seasons, anytime somebody signs a contract extension, John Wall is the first one to jump up and say, I have mad respect for Reggie Jackson, but he's paid higher than me and I'm better. It's like, well, John, you signed that contract and you got paid very well for when you signed that contract. Like, you can't just jump in and say, like...
And I think that's probably just youth. Because when that happened, he was still pretty young.
He was still pretty young.
And I understand why a backup point guard making more than him would irk him.
Oh, absolutely. Get it.
It's also part of understanding that these sports contracts happen on a cycle, and depending on when you catch the cycle determines how much money you're going to make.
Which is why you see some people signing the 1-year deals. I mean, until you catch like the next cycle and then you get like more money. I mean, like Timothy Mozgov, I mean, most people didn't expect him to sign for that much. In other free agent years, he wouldn't have gotten anything close to that. But last year there was an influx of cash and everybody used it.
Speaking of guys who have not signed long-term deals,
okay,
there's still a restricted free agent out there that hasn't gotten a single offer.
I know who you're talking about now.
Do you? Who am I talking about?
Nerlens Noel?
Yes. Scheduled to make like $1.5 million next year. Nerlens Noel has gotten 0 offers.
And Dallas loves him, but Cuban knows he's not getting any other offers, so I mean they're really playing hardball with him.
Extremely hardball, which Cuban is historically done, other than with Dirk.
I mean, he's a very loyal guy once you're on his squad and
but
everything.
He's a businessman. He's a cutthroat businessman. And why would you pay Nerlens Noel $20 million when you can pay him $1.5 million? Even though it's probably going to hurt their relationship and Nerlens Noel won't sign there next year when he's an unrestricted free agent. It's amazing because Nerlens Noel, we talk about this way too much on the podcast because unfortunately we started the podcast in the meat of the NBA talk. Nerlens Noel is the perfect example of the old style of center that it's tough to make a superstar in today's league. He is the athletic big man who's great inside but has no jump shot.
Yeah,
can't stretch the floor.
And then that's the other thing. He's also like, which is why he holds a lot of intrigue to teams like Dallas, who, I mean, Dallas really got him for salary dumps. I mean, that's literally what they did. They traded Bogut, who got bought out by Philly anyway.
It was a great trade at the time.
and they expected to re-sign him long term, but I think they kind of surveyed the market and kind of knew like, okay, we'll wait for you to get an offer sheet, and then everything else that happened, and they saw he wasn't getting one, so they're kind of hoping they can lock him up for pretty cheap.
It's strange because him and Rudy Gobert are very similar players. Would you agree with that? Same play style.
Kind of around the same play style. I think Gobert's ceiling's higher and he's a better player.
I think Gobert's a better defensive player, but offensively they're identical. And maybe Gobert's ceiling is higher, but that time will tell. It's proof that what the Clippers did with DeAndre Jordan was objectively the wrong move. Like, you can't lock up these big guys to superstar money because the big guy that has no jump shot can't be a superstar anymore.
And they arguably just did it again when they gave Blake Griffin all that money. I mean, he has a jump shot, but I mean, he's more the old school, old style
yes,
guy.
But at least Blake Griffin has handles and has a decent mid-range jump shot. I think you can thrive in this league as a center with at least a mid-range jump shot. You don't have to be jacking threes. You can be a Marc Gasol, a Pau Gasol, who have a really good mid-range jump shot, which can stretch the floor just enough.
And they both can make threes too.
They can, but they usually don't. But yeah. I agree. I mean, it's a dying breed. 15 years ago, Nerlens Noel would be making max right now.
Last season, Nerlens Noel arguably would be making max.
Maybe 2 seasons ago when Drummond got paid. No, that was last season, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was last season.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, all the money going around, all the restricted free agents that were signed, I mean, he would probably be on the Brooklyn Nets right now had he been a restricted free agent last season.
It's really weird that a guy that we both like, that's pretty highly regarded, hasn't received anything from the free agent market.
I feel like the different offers came about, like, you know, the Nets were able to swing D'Angelo Russell and Mozgov, so it's like, okay, well, there's no need for us to jump into restricted free agency. I mean, even look at Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I mean, he turned down $5 and $80 from the Pistons, and he was offended and said, that's not even close to what I'm going to get. And then he ends up signing for like $1 and $17 for the Lakers. You know, it's just a lot of people saw last year's money and thought that was going to be out there for them this year.
The market dried up quickly. And this is why the NBA a few years ago, or I guess 2 years ago, when they were talking about this increase in salary cap with the new TV contracts, wanted to do it incrementally instead of all at once. And the players said, no, we want it all at once. So one class of free agents got all of the money, and now no one has any space.
Exactly, and that's going to hurt the players in the long run because there's a lot of good players out there that are signing for a lot less than they thought they were going to get.
I think most of the players will be fine. It's the big men that are really getting hammered right now because nobody. Why waste your money on a big man? You don't need them.
Well, and honestly, it's a lot of the older guys too. Where in years past, they'd be brought in. Like, I know he had a rough year last year, but has Bogut signed anywhere?
I don't think Bogut has signed anywhere. Pau Gasol just got re-signed with the Spurs.
Yeah, and he, declined his contract and took a little less, from my understanding. I mean, just to work it out. But, different years. I mean, you had a few guys get massively paid, like Joakim Noah, Mozgov, Drummond, all those people, but then they sucked it all up that year. And then,
right now, no one has money.
Yeah,
no one has space. So a guy like Nerlens Noel, who's a promising young big man, can't get paid.
Well, look at Portland. Portland would probably be all over Nerlens Noel had this been last season or something, and had the expectation of what was happening this year, which it fell through and the cap didn't really increase. They would probably be out there trying to make moves.
To be fair, the cap only fell a couple million short. Like, I think the projected cap was going to be 101 and it ended up being 99 or something like that. So it's not huge.
Mid-season, but like last off season, it was projected to be 110 this year. And then throughout the season, they started dropping it incrementally. Like, well, maybe 103. Oh, now it's going to be 101. And it's like, actually start free agency, 99. Hope it worked out for you,
and a lot of that is because of something I think we've talked about before, where these big big name stars are sitting out Saturday night
Oh, absolutely.
nationally broadcasted games. Like the NBA really, I mean, first of all, if you're a player, you should understand that you're dependent on the overall league's health, and maybe don't do that. Maybe take a break on a Tuesday afternoon game when you're only going to disappoint the crowds and not the entire country where all the ad revenue comes from.
Like if you're Golden State Tuesday night against the Sacramento Kings instead of Saturday night against the Spurs.
Yeah, I mean, you know when your game's nationally broadcasted, and those are when the league makes the most money. And so Popovich does it all the time. LeBron did it a couple times this season. There was a Saturday night game with Cleveland where Kevin Love, Kyrie, and LeBron all sat on a Saturday night game on ESPN. Like, you can't do that because the next time the TV contracts come up, ESPN's not going to pay what they would have paid before. Fox isn't going to pay what they would have paid.
Just speaking of that, is ESPN going to be around? I mean,
well, they'll be around. ESPN's not going to die. Why would ESPN is still profitable?
Well, it's just like I don't know when the contract's actually up. Is what I'm saying. I don't know if it's like a 10-year deal, 20-year deal, 5.
I think it's like a 7 or so year left. Baseball is the first sport, to my understanding, that's going to come up for ESPN is their baseball deal that they probably won't renew and will just let Fox have. I don't know. I think that's in like 4 years or 5 years. That's the first big one. I think because they just signed their basketball deal like 2 years ago.
Yeah, and paid like a ton of money for it.
Way too much money.
And especially the same with Monday Night Football as well. That's the one that's really hamstringing them because last year every Monday Night Football game was pretty terrible.
The problem with that is if you're ESPN, you need to have a piece of the NFL. The NFL is too big for you to just have none of, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But anyway, we got way off topic.
Yeah, we did.
I think that's it for NBA offseason moves that we talk about every week, except for last week for some reason. Any further input from you on NBA offseason moves?
The only thing I just want to let y'all know that Kyrie is going to the Orlando Magic. He will also be joined by D. Wade when he gets bought out by the Bulls.
No, D. Wade's going to the Heat. He already enrolled his kids in school in Miami.
Hey, doesn't surprise. I think his kids liked Miami better than Chicago.
Well, I mean, Miami would have been home to them, to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he did that move for him because he wanted to go home, but his kids were all born in
He did
Miami.
that move for him because he wanted to get paid.
He wanted to
Let's
get paid.
Let's be honest here.
Yeah,
let's be real.
He used it as a cover of, which he probably always did. He always wanted to play for the Bulls.
Well, and I'm sure it helped. I mean, it is his hometown. I'm sure that helped.
Because I think Denver actually offered him the same contract as well, and then Miami offered him a similar one, and when you factor in the taxes, was a better offer than the Bulls offer. But
I think he was peeved at
Pat Riley trying to get KD.
Yeah.
Hey, KD had a house in Miami. He thought he had a shot.
No shot. Let's move on.
Anyway, speaking of no shot to coach next season, Hugh Freeze.
Hey-o. Talk about a sex scandal.
Hey, you mean Ole Miss wasn't doing everything morally?
It's amazing how, you go from horrible to all these number one recruits, and you just, you assume everything's on the up and up, right?
It's really crazy how much when you have to compete with Nick Saban, how much you'll really do to sell your soul, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, college sports is full of corruption, all that, but Hugh Freeze had this coming for a while. I don't feel bad at all. Did you hear what happened?
I heard they were looking through his phone or something and found escort services numbers.
Yeah.
Like he was getting quotes or something.
So apparently he called an escort service number and somehow that got out. And when questioned about it, he said, I just entered the wrong number. My area code is 813, but I accidentally typed in 313 or something like that. Everyone's like, cool. So I don't know who, but someone started digging in his phone records and found that he called this number quite a bit. way too often for it to be a wrong number situation. And also, generally, the phone calls were like a minute long. If it's a wrong number, you're going to hang up immediately. You're not going to stay on the phone for over a minute. So yeah, he was engaging in a little bit of prostitution, apparently, which by NCAA rules, I imagine is not okay, and he got fired.
I mean, yeah, it's part of the reason why Louisville had all the sanctions with their basketball program as well, because they were also involved in a.
That was a bit different, though.
It was like it was their recruits,
right? They were bringing women in to have sex with potentially underage recruits, whereas this was, just Hugh Freeze get a little extra action on the side, But yeah, such an up and up college there.
Hey, I mean, that's kind of like the thing where they say like the the head coach of the prominent school in your state is like really the governor or whatever. I mean, because this sounds very political.
I mean, Nick Saban probably has as much power in the state of Alabama as the governor.
I mean,
that's sort of the idea. He's the highest paid government official, technically.
Oh, yeah, he is.
Because if you're an employee of a public university, you technically work for the government because it's a public university. So, yeah, Nick Saban, all the power.
Which is...
Hugh Freeze, a bunch of the power. Now he's gone. But, I mean, I'm not going to feel bad for Hugh Freeze. He did it to himself. It's amazing how they went from an amazing recruiting class to once they started getting investigating, they're just bad now. It's amazing how that happens. But yeah.
I feel like, not to just, throw shade on Ole Miss, but there's like a lot of schools that will have those like little runs that kind of come up out of nowhere, and then it just fizzles out so quickly. And I feel like Ole Miss is kind of one of those schools.
I mean, think about all the players they've had. They had the Kimdichie brothers, they had Tunzel, they had Treadwell, they had Chad Kelly. I mean, they've had a bunch of talent, which now they won't have, so the team won't be as good, but they were arguably one of the most talented teams in the SEC, maybe second only to like Alabama.
And absolutely, and then they would honestly, the Alabama-Ole Miss battles were so tough, and that's
epic. Those were great
so
games.
Tough and epic, but if you look at what happens to Ole Miss every year, it would seem like they would knock off Goliath and beat Alabama, and then the next game they would either have a clunker or basically everyone would get injured, and then they weren't the same the rest of the season. It's like it took them so much to get over the mountain, to get to the mountaintop, and then after that, it's just like, well, that's our season. We beat Alabama, kind of thing.
And that's part of sports when you're not a dominant program. I mean, when you come off the high of a win like that, you're going to have a letdown. Generally, that's how that works.
Absolutely. And then that's what makes Saban and Alabama so great, because Ole Miss would have that top end talent where Alabama, like their second strings, would be first strings on most other schools.
Well, yeah, that's why Alabama is so great, is their depth.
Absolutely.
I mean, Nick Saban is a master architect. He's the greatest college football coach to ever live. And he does a great job of designing the team in a way. It was Kirby Smart's biggest complaint when he got to Georgia, was that all the starters are great, but where's your depth? You have no one other than your starters that can play. And Nick Saban has like 3 strings of guys that could all be good and help the team.
Exactly. That's like the thing with Georgia when you'd see like, oh, well, we lost like 2 wide receivers this game and then the season's over. Where like Alabama, it's like, yeah, we lost a wide receiver, but here's unknown guy that is actually really good that people don't know about. Because like I feel like, just to get a little on the Georgia topic here, Georgia would be stacked at running back every year, but that would be the only position Georgia's stacked at every season.
Well, Georgia is stacked at running back every year, but yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. It was a fault of Mark Richt, I guess, to only focus on starting needs and not worry so much about backups. I don't know.
And it would just be weird, because it seemed like every year you would have the number 1 running back recruit, like no matter what.
Always have great running backs. It doesn't help when Alabama's sucking up all the SEC talent, though. All the Southeastern talent is just going to Alabama.
And it's not even like Alabama's getting people from New Jersey, like Fitzpatrick. Like one of the top players on Alabama's defense, up and coming, is from New Jersey. Like Penn State, Boston College, all those other schools, Notre Dame, we're in on him.
Everyone wants to play for Alabama.
And the guys Alabama is getting from Hawaii now, like our big quarterback recruit who's going to split time with Jalen Hurts, who redshirted last year from Hawaii, and his brother's playing for Alabama next year too. So,
all right, well, that was fun.
Yep, a little college football talk.
Hugh Freeze,
yeah.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, Hugh Freeze.
You weren't that great of a coach anyway, so no one's going to miss you.
Oh, he's a good coach.
You think he was a good head coach?
Yeah.
Kind of underperformed given the talent on that team.
I mean, like I said, like they play Alabama, and then the next game everybody would be injured because they just used all the gas in the tank to beat Alabama.
I guess he did a decent job if you count cheating as doing a decent job.
Hey, he was good at Arkansas State before he got hired by
Let's move on.
Ole Miss.
We don't need to talk about Arkansas State.
Hey, that's a SEC coach university. You go coach at Arkansas State, you get a head coaching job in the SEC. Look at Gus Malzahn.
Okay.
Same guy. That's just saying.
Let's just move on.
Okay. So speaking of more football talk, let's see. We have a couple different options here. We can go into Dave Gettleman getting fired really late in the offseason, or the bad habits of Ezekiel Elliott.
We should talk about Zeke, I think. I think that's more impactful when it's your superstar running back versus a GM. So, yeah, let's talk Zeke. Go ahead and intro us what's happening with him.
Well, Ezekiel Elliott has gotten into some off-the-field instances since he's really been in the league, which has been about one season, really. So the most recent report is he's already under investigation for some of his other misconducts, potentially off the field, and was looking at suspension. And then recently it seemed like he got into a fight in a Dallas bar, and cops were called, and the investigation is going on. One witness said Ezekiel Elliott didn't end up punching anybody, but it's kind of more of the thing of you kind of have to stop putting yourself in the situation for bad things to happen, or otherwise you're going to probably end up getting suspended to even send a message whether you get convicted or not.
Yeah, and I don't think he's going to get suspended for this. If he didn't throw any punches, he technically didn't break any laws. So I would doubt that they would suspend him. Maybe a fine for like misconduct and bad representation of the league or something like that. But you are right that he keeps finding himself in these not great situations. And I understand that he's basically still a college kid, and college kids, they go to bars and they drink and they have a good time. When you're a professional in a town where everybody knows you, you got to be a little bit careful.
And for that team, I mean, you're the superstar running back of the Dallas Cowboys.
You're the best player on America's team.
Absolutely. Like, you can't... And
you just had an MVP caliber season. People were talking about you, a rookie running back, as an MVP candidate. And I think he finished like 5th in voting, 5th or 6th. I mean, he was up there. He had an amazing season. He was the best. I wouldn't say he was the best running back in the league last year, but he was top 3.
Especially when you consider MVP is really who's the best quarterback that year.
It's an MVP award, and he was the top finishing non-QB. I mean, he was great last season. You just have to be careful. I mean, we don't know exactly what happened. I'm not going to fault the guy for being out in a situation and someone instigating him, that sort of thing. We don't know what happened. But there are ways to kind of... It's like defensive driving, Weston. You're not very good at it, but there is a way to drive where you can be less likely to be involved in accidents, even if they aren't your own fault. It's sort of the same concept. You got to put yourself in not... You can't put yourself in bad situations where things may happen sort of like late night at a club or bar.
If only you all could see glares over the airwaves.
Yeah, I kind of took a shot there, huh?
Yeah, you really did. Wow. I'm a good driver.
I didn't say you weren't. All I said was that, defensive driving, and a little bit of caution can help avoid accidents that aren't your fault.
I use plenty of caution.
It's debatable.
I'm just a better driver than you. You don't respect it. Got skills.
What was that?
I can't click.
No, you did that earlier when you were doing it.
Shh. Is that better?
What was? Shh. You make a
Driving
horrible
through the
sound
water.
effects. Oh my! Move on. Move on.
Anyway, but I agree with your overall point without the shade thrown my way. There's a way to like avoid those situations. You can't. There's the old saying like, nothing good happens after 2 a.m., which I don't necessarily know I buy all the time, but you can expect certain situations like, hey, maybe something bad can happen tonight and maybe I need to protect myself from that happening. Like either have different people with you who you trust who will protect you, or instead of going out and going into a place where something bad might happen, you hang out at your house.
Or, yeah, nothing bad after 2 a.m. doesn't apply everywhere. Or nothing good after 2 a.m., sorry. But the places that saying is referring to are places like nightclubs and bars. You're free to go to Taco Bell at 2 a.m. You'll be fine.
Right.
No one's going to try and get in a fight with you. It's when you introduce alcohol and drugs and money and that sort of thing that...
And girls.
And girls. Girls is a big one. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. It's when you introduce those sorts of things to the equation that you get in a fight. If you're just going to a restaurant to get food, you'll be fine.
Right. If you're just going to Applebee's at like 2 a.m. or IHOP.
Get some half-priced appetizers.
Oh, absolutely. Oof. That's the great after-work snack. Just Ezekiel Elliott.
Seeing Zeke going into Applebee's at 2 a.m. to get some half-priced apps. I could see Kawhi Leonard doing that.
Kawhi Leonard is frugal. He'll pull up in the 99 Blazer with 2 buy one get ones on the boneless wings and get the half price apps. Like that's what that man would do. And you know what? Kawhi Leonard keeps himself out of trouble.
I bet that dude's got a coupon binder. Guaranteed he has a coupon binder.
He buys the little books that like the Little League teams sell at like Publix and stuff. Like
get a coupon for a free hug. I got some of those.
I feel like if you'd run into Kawhi Leonard and just be like, oh, there's another dude just in the grocery store line, just unassuming.
He's the guy who refuses to go in the express lane with 11 items because it's more than 10, and the sign clearly says 10 items or less.
And he's just too good of a guy. And then Tim Duncan is also there with 12 items and is in the line right in front of him and said, good job.
But then that damn Manu Ginobili, he's got 13 items and he goes right through the express line. What are you doing, Manu?
And he's like, you know what? It's a 12-pack of beer. That counts as one item.
Well, I would say a 12-pack of beer does count as one item.
Yeah.
However, if the 12 beers are not connected, then it's 12 items.
Exactly.
Definitely.
But then he would be the kind of guy that's like, well, I'm buying them together, so it's a 12-pack.
He's wrong.
See, that's Manu Ginobili.
It's all about how you scan them into the system, right? Do you scan the item 10 times, or do you scan it once? If you only scan it once, that's one item.
And I feel like Tony Parker is also the kind of guy that have 4 cartfuls and would be in the express line.
I don't think he's that bad of a guy. Let's give Tony Parker a little bit of credit.
Of the guys that we mentioned, Tony Parker would be the one that would, it's true.
Hey, what is going on with Gettleman? Let's move on.
Okay. Well,
other story.
Dave Gettleman, general manager of the Panthers for the former general manager of the Panthers for the past few years, has gotten fired in another weird late season firing, which is strange. The Chiefs and the Panthers have both done this, and even the Bills before that, where they allow their general managers, to run the offseason in the draft and then fire them right before the season starts. And they've let internal candidates for their general manager position just up and leave the organization and get other jobs. The Chiefs and the Panthers both did that because Chris Ballard went to Indianapolis to be the Colts GM, and he was supposed to be next in line for the Chiefs GM job. And then Brandon Beane left to be the Bills GM from Carolina, and then now they're both have internal candidates, and then the former GM of the Panthers before Gettleman got there is now the interim GM for the season. It's just a strange
it's so
situation.
Weird. I mean, I was really shocked when this happened with the Chiefs too, just because generally the offseason is the most important time for executives, right?
Right.
It's the time that they're assembling the roster, they're drafting, they're getting free agents, they're signing extensions, they're cutting players. But just in the middle of the offseason, seemingly out of the blue, just fire your GM. It's weird. I would love to hear an explanation because I have not so far.
And the one thing I've heard about the Panthers is Richardson is kind of like running the show right now, and he seemed to be upset that Thomas Davis hadn't already signed his extension, as well as, giving Greg Olsen more money because they're apparently two of his favorite players. But Thomas Davis came out and said, me and Gettleman were working on an extension. We just hadn't gotten to the right number yet. And Greg Olsen has talked about, he'd kind of like a little bit more money, but he wasn't at like the holding out phase, and he understood what was going on. So it was just one of those things, like, it's very strange. Like, you have to think there was something else going on to cause this kind of move.
Impatient management, maybe.
I guess
or ownership,
so.
I should say.
That's really what it seems like, because I know his first name is Marty, but I'm really blanking on his last name, who's their interim GM. He had been their GM for years prior, and him and Jerry Richardson have a very, very strong relationship. But it shows kind of a lack of organizational direction, it seems like to me, because...
And I feel like that we've sort of had hints of that ever since the Josh Norman debacle.
Right.
When they just pulled the franchise tag off the table and said, never mind, we'll just let you walk. Which made absolutely no sense at the time.
And then, part of me is wondering if that was really Gettleman or if it was Richardson, because some of the players came out and defended Gettleman, like Thomas Davis, Michael Orr, who's since been cut, and then there's
the blind. Speaking of the blind side,
getting blindside. Hey,
why? What?
I hope he recovers from his concussion.
The joke was obvious. You didn't have to explain it. Takes away the luster of the joke, Weston.
Don't you talk to me
Just
that way.
Shut up.
Don't you look at me in that tone of voice.
You're an idiot. You think that was supposed to be funny? You're a disgusting human being.
Really not.
You didn't deserve that. I'm sorry.
I'm generally well regarded, I'd say, by my peers. But...
Well, don't be ridiculous. You don't hear what they really say. They love you. You're a star.
I know it, thanks. I know I'm a star. I knew you're just kidding with me. You're just joshing with me.
Just joshing.
Anyway,
what a horrible tangent.
That was terrible. At least we threw Joshin in there for Josh Norman, right?
Nice.
Woo!
Bring it back around.
Saved it. Anyway, we don't know what the situation with Josh Norman was really Gettleman's doing or Jerry Richardson. I know the former players like Steve Smith and D'Angelo Williams, who, in all honesty, Steve Smith didn't have a great year before he left and was getting really old. And then D'Angelo Williams had an absolutely terrible year before he left Carolina and went to the Steelers. So, I mean, I guess he just really thought they didn't have much left in the tank, and honestly, I didn't think they had much left in the tank.
To be fair to Steve Smith, though, he is one of the best players in that franchise's history.
Right.
He's the greatest receiver to ever play for that organization. So, I mean, he probably felt he deserved a little bit more. And he ended up being great until he got hurt the next season. So.
Right, and I mean, from my understanding from back in the day, I think Steve Smith was still wanting to be paid like the number one receiver, like one of the best in football, and that was where the disconnect lied.
And in which case, I understand why he would let him go. But I also understand why Steve Smith would be like, hey,
oh yeah,
I'm the best player to ever play for this franchise, and I feel like I deserve something.
Right.
But yeah. Anyway, sorry for that tangent.
No, you're good. But it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Carolina. I expect, if he isn't already locked up, I expect Thomas Davis to get that extension very soon, as well as Greg Olsen. Whether you really want to lock up a couple of older guys necessarily, but I mean, if that's what Richardson wants to do, then it's his call. They're still productive, so.
They're both great players.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Greg Olson's a top 5 tight end, and Thomas Davis is probably a top 15 linebacker, maybe top 10. I don't know if I would pay Thomas Davis a ton, though, just because of his injury history.
That's
as much
the
as
thing.
I love Thomas Davis.
I love Thomas Davis and Greg Olson too, and I'd understand more the Greg Olson giving him a raise to kind of, since he's broken out a little bit since he got to Carolina. But Thomas Davis just being upwards of 35 years of age with the injury history he's had, he's still been very, very productive, but I mean,
eventually you fall off.
Eventually you fall
and
off.
So far he's done a great job keeping his body in shape to not fall off, but he has had injury problems the last few years.
I mean, look at somebody who none of us saw coming, Patrick Willis at 30. You hit 30 and he wasn't the same guy anymore.
Man, and that one still, it tears me up inside.
Yeah,
Patrick Willis was the best linebacker I've ever seen, maybe other than Ray Lewis, and he just fell off of a cliff.
It's just from one season to the other, and then he saw it coming, and luckily for him, after that season, he's like, you know what, that's it, and I'm going into different ventures, and he's done a couple startups since then, which is good for him, but you know, you never know when that time's going to come when you're an NFL player, especially when you're upwards of 30.
When you're an athlete in an athletic sport, so basically all sports except for baseball. Sorry, no offense. You know what I mean, though.
You can reinvent yourself.
At some point, your legs just don't work the same as they used to. And it's generally what happens in these sports. There's usually not a slow, gentle decline, especially with the great players. There's not a slow descent into mediocrity. It's you're great, you're great, you're great. You're a little bit less great, you're not good. And it's whether you retire before the not good part happens. I'm worried about LeBron. That's something that I think about with LeBron, where he's got more miles on his leg than anyone has ever had at this point in his career. And eventually, you're going to fall off. You're not going to have it anymore.
It's like Russell Westbrook. I mean, I've heard somebody talking about that yesterday. His game does not age well.
No. And anyone who relies on their pure athleticism for their sport, it's the reason why running backs age so quick. Their one tool that running backs have is their pure athleticism.
Right.
And usually that's the first thing to go when you get older, because your legs just get slower and you're beat up and you can't do it anymore. It's sort of like what happened with Grant Hill in basketball. Like, he was this super athletic player, and then one day he just lost it.
Yeah, the injuries took it away from him, and that's...
Derrick Rose is another guy.
Yeah.
That's a good example. A guy who relied on his supreme athleticism. There was a time in the league where there could have been a debate who was more athletic, Derrick Rose or Russell Westbrook. That's how great Derrick Rose was. And then he hurt his leg and it was gone. He's not the same guy.
And he's still trying to play like old school Derrick Rose instead of working on, prolonging his career.
And sometimes it works, but a lot of times he just can't get around the defender like he used to be able to.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll
what a horrible transition.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. I was gonna bring up another point, but then I was like, nah.
You were like, nah. Really?
Well, because
that's how you're gonna say it to the podcast audience. I was like, nah.
Hey, we're a casual show. Does I wear my suit and tie in our Times Square office? Anyway, I was going to bring up that, like, the Cavs were thinking of bringing in Derrick Rose and how so many people were talking, like, had this been, like, 3 years ago, man, what a move. But now it's like Derrick Rose is a punchline. It's got the contrast between the Cavs offseason and what the Warriors have done, because if the Warriors bring in Derrick Rose, you're kind of like, oh, don't necessarily understand it, but I'm sure they have a plan. Well, you're not laughing about it.
It's exactly what they did with Swaggy P. If the Cavs had signed Swaggy P, we'd jokingly say, ha, 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 Swaggy P, he's not very good, but look at him going to the Cavs. Whereas we say with the Warriors, wow, look at that. It's another decent shooter they can add to their bench, And
then we start justifying it and everything.
He'll play, 10 minutes a game, make a couple threes. That's a good addition. It's the same thing as the Spurs. I mean, or the Patriots. The Patriots are a great example where literally today, if Tom Brady got traded, we would say, well, Bill Belichick has a plan. Garoppolo must be that good. I mean, there are some organizations that get the benefit of the doubt like that, and the Cavs are not one of them. I happen to think that the Derrick Rose addition is good for the Cavs because he's better than Darren Williams.
I absolutely agree. That's all, as a backup point guard, that's all you really...
And I think Derrick Rose will be a fine backup point guard. He can't be a starter anymore. He's not good enough. And he's going to have to take a reality check on that one. But as a backup, Derrick Rose will be fine. He's good enough. I would take Derrick Rose over a guy like Matthew Dellavedova at this point.
I mean, what you need out of a second unit point guard is a guy who can keep the show running.
You need an energy guy.
Yeah, whether it's he does all the scoring himself and it's kind of more of like a ball hog or something, or whether it's a guy who's a supreme facilitator and
you just
need somebody to keep the engine
running.
running.
You need the offense to not die when most of the starters are on the bench. And Derrick Rose, I think, is a guy that can do that.
Right. You don't want to be the Oklahoma City Thunder in the playoffs where it's like Westbrook's off the floor and nothing happens.
Well, that was because, the team was built around Russell Westbrook where it literally can't function without him.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have no other ball handles.
Victor Oladipo.
Oh, gosh.
Victor Oladipo, get us yours. Go get yours.
Anyway,
so speaking of transactions, we have a couple of MLB trades to talk about.
Please delight me with these trades. I'm very interested.
You're very interested. Awesome. Well, we have the Yankees acquiring Todd Frazier, David Robertson, and Tommy Conley for Blake Rutherford, Tyler Clippard, and 2 other prospects from the Yankees.
2 other prospects? Like they're not good enough prospects to get their name on the trade?
Honestly, I don't remember their names off the top of my head, but
it's fine. You don't have to look.
Okay.
It's fine.
The main guys were Rutherford, who was their 2016 first-round pick outfielder. He's a very, very good prospect, but he isn't Gleyber Torres, Jorge Mateo level of prospect.
Okay, sure, yeah.
They're 2 of the top prospects.
I know those guys.
They're 2 of the top prospects in the game.
Oh, you don't have to explain it to me. I knew that.
Okay, but he's a very good prospect, but like not necessarily
top tier.
And plus they already have a couple. They have Aaron Judge and Clint Frazier, who are definitely ahead of him on the organizational depth chart. So you could afford to get rid of an outfielder. And big thing for the Yankees is this brings Robertson back to New York and helps stabilize the bullpen because Chapman and Betances, they've been okay this year, but have been shaky of late. And then the rest of the bullpen, like Tyler Clippard, who they shipped out as part of a salary matching kind of situation, shipped out to the White Sox. He's been pretty awful this year. His stuff just hasn't been the same. It's probably showing his age a little bit. But just hasn't been the same. So shipped him out, and then you have Todd Frazier, who grew up a Yankee fan. He is from New Jersey. He, as a 12-year-old, was on the field with Derek Jeter before the game, so that's cool seeing those pictures out there. He's probably a guy who, whether they offer him a ton of money or not, is going to re-sign with them as he's a free agent at the end of the year. And it allows you to have Frazier at third base, and you can move Chase Headley over to first. And first base has been a black hole for the Yankees this year. And if Headley doesn't work out over there, Frazier can get some reps over at first, and you also have Garrett Cooper, who you picked up in a minor deal. But again, for the White Sox, it's just more of them reloading. The amount of prospects they have, top prospects they have, is just phenomenal. It's crazy, honestly. And wow, thanks for staring at me like that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's phenomenal.
So many names, I can't keep up.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry. I can't. I just don't know any of these players other than Frazier. I recognize the name. That's it.
You'd recognize Robertson if you saw him.
Okay.
Like he was the former closer for the Yankees. He took over when Rivera retired. Mariano
I know that
Rivera
name.
retired.
I know who Mariano Rivera is.
He was his longtime setup man, and then became the closer when Rivera retired, and then was a free agent, and the Yankees decided to not re-sign him. That was the year they let him and Robinson Cano walk and signed
Jacob decisions.
And not only
that was the Ellsbury.
They signed Ellsbury instead. Yeah. So they let those two
Yankees.
They let those two walk and signed Ellsbury. Great
silly,
move.
silly Yankees.
Great move, right? Woo! Sometimes you miss. You know what? Just sometimes you miss. Happens.
Any other MLB trades that have happened?
Well, there's the trade. We already talked about JD Martinez going to Arizona. That's a pretty good move for them. We've already talked about Quintana going to the Cubs.
Yeah, I
good
think we
move for
covered
them.
that last week, yeah.
But you have a move closer to my heart. Marco Gonzalez traded from the St. Louis Cardinals to the Seattle Mariners for their number 2 prospect, the number 38 overall prospect in all of baseball, Tyler O'Neill. And
Why didn't they get their number 1 prospect?
Because Kyle Lewis is a monster. That's the main Kyle Lewis is their number 1 prospect, and I think is regarded top 20 in all of baseball.
Oh, okay.
And he's also an outfielder. So Tyler O'Neill is also an outfielder, and they have Ben Gamel, who emerged this year, as well as Mitch Haniger up in the major leagues, both young outfielders who they got in recent trades. So they really had the depth to deal an outfielder, and Kyle Lewis's ceiling is deemed higher than Tyler O'Neill. So
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Smile and nod.
Okay.
So many names.
So many names that you don't know. You'll know soon enough because I'm pretty sure Kyle Lewis is going to be a star. I really like that guy. Out of Mercer University, I believe. Mercer in Macon, Georgia.
I hope
Very
he's
good
good
player.
for you. I like the Cardinals organization.
Thank
it's a
you.
good baseball
That's what-
organization, and yeah.
That's what somebody joked around and said, well, we see this move, and it's kind of a question mark for both teams, but there is one thing we can probably regard. The Cardinals are kind of like the Patriots, where it's like they make a move, it's like, well, this guy's probably going to be a 3-time All-Star, and the guy they traded may be a lefty reliever for a couple seasons.
It's probably the closest thing baseball has to that at this point.
Where it's like, and it hasn't worked out necessarily great this year where the moves, but you have to have like the long range view of what's happened, just historically. And, the guy, because a lot of people were saying the Matt Adams trade did not work out well because Matt Adams just started out on fire when he went to Atlanta. But the prospect the Cardinals got for him was a guy, he's an A-ball, but he's been hitting very, very well since he's been in the Cardinals organization and was well regarded beforehand. It's just right now it seems like Matt Adams is on fire and carrying the Atlanta Braves for a little bit while Freeman was hurt, and then the Cardinals just get this random guy like a bag of baseballs or something, which I think only time will tell. Anyway,
You done?
I'm pretty
that it?
excited. Proud Canadian outfielder Tyler O'Neill. I'm excited.
Let's go Canada.
Canada.
Woo!
He was the starting left fielder for Team Canada in the World Baseball Classic. So
There you go.
yeah. Anyway, we have our most popular segment, everybody's favorite. That's why we save it for the end of the show. So you listen to us blab for about an hour, and then we throw this in at the end. You ready?
Florida man. Except it's not.
It's not from Florida. It's a shout out to Missouri. This story is coming out of my old neck of the woods, St. Louis area.
St. Louis man.
St. Louis man. And excuse me for a moment because my screen went blank.
Oh, goody.
Yep. Oh, I get the beach ball. The spinning beach ball. Any Mac users know what I'm talking about.
Sure hope it's still recording.
Oh, it's still recording. We're good on that front. Safari's not working, though. But anyway, I know most of the story off the top of my head anyway. So, certain section of St. Louis, there's a man who decides he's going to go to the gym. Okay.
That's a normal thing to
Normal
decide.
thing to do. He's had this house in his family for over 40 years. It was his mother's home. It's finally his home, and he's paid it off. He's very excited about it. So he goes to the gym. His house is at the end of one street. So, like my former house when I lived in Missouri, one street ends right at his driveway, and then there's a cross street. Well, this car runs the stop sign and is reportedly going about 80 or 90 miles an hour down this side street for some reason. Don't know what this guy was doing. But misses the stop sign, not paying attention, floors through the stop sign, goes up the embanked driveway of this man's house, and his car flies through the air like a Fast and Furious or Transformers movie and lands into his roof. and the man is trapped in his SUV, stuck in this dude's roof.
Oh my god.
So the guy returns home from the gym to see that his house is practically destroyed, and there's a man getting fished out of his roof while he's stuck in his car.
That's horrible. What a horrible thing to come home to.
Like, I know, you're just like, you've been working all day or something, or you're about to go into work. He's worked in numerous restaurants over the years, and the man's like, obviously upset. He luckily had insurance, but you come home from the gym, just a normal everyday thing, and then there's a Chevy Trailblazer trapped in your roof.
Yeah, that's not good.
No, the firefighters, it showed pictures of them. The houses are kind of close together in this neighborhood. They're standing on the roof of the other house with ladders trying to climb across. They deemed that the roof was stable enough for them to walk on, but it took them a while to deem that it was stable, and the guy in the car is absolutely panicking. I mean, naturally, but it's, as of right now, which was why I wanted the article pulled up, they hadn't come out with what his motives were and what was necessarily going on. If the guy was just late for work, not paying attention, just what happened.
Probably drugs. I think that's a fair assumption.
I didn't want to assume it, but
You're
lot of people were
Fast
thinking.
And Furious into somebody's roof? That's drugs.
Yeah.
That's amazing, though. Got a little height on that jump.
I'll show you the pictures once we're off the air, and I'll tweet them out on at the Rollout Show,
That's
and also
at the Rollout Show.
Also on Instagram at the Rollout Show. We will post those pictures. It's kind of phenomenal to see how much air this guy got, and that he lived. And I say he had minor injuries, but still, it's crazy.
Well, all right. That was this week's edition of St. Louis Man.
What up, St. Louis? Shout out to Nelly. If only glares could come across the airwaves. The glare I'm getting from Bradley over here is
That's the dumbest comment. What?
That's
what?
When Nelly
What's wrong with you?
When Nelly accepted a Grammy, his whole thing was he grabbed the Grammy and said, "What up, St. Louis?" and walked off. Nelly is from St. Louis, if you guys did not know.
Just end the stupid show.
You would understand if you were from
Just
there.
end it.
You would understand if you were from there.
End it. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of The Rollout Show. Please tune in next week to The Rollout Show.
Episode 21.
Follow us on Twitter at The Rollout Show. Follow us on Instagram at The Rollout Show. Tweet us your questions at The Rollout Show.
Email us at therolloutshow@gmail.com.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thanks for listening, guys. See ya.
See ya.